Americans have been taking to the streets, calling on lawmakers to help people in danger of being evicted. Now there's no longer a federal program in place to protect them. New York lawmakers voted to extend a state-level eviction freeze until mid-January 2022. This is likely to come as temporary relief to New Yorkers like Karina, who lost her job during the pandemic and is about 11 months behind on her rent.
Since I lost my job, rent started piling up. Landlords threatened me, send me eviction letters saying that they want to evict me. I better, threatening letters that if I don't pay, that it's going to go against my credit. And, all I could say is, oh boy, I don't know what to say, Why don't you do the right thing?
Government data for 2020 shows there were about 580,000 people experiencing homelessness in the US on any given night, with the total number of the country's homeless up for a fourth consecutive year. The figures don't take into account the impact of the pandemic, which officials and activists say have amplified housing inequalities and made America's homeless crisis even worse. A recent Harvard University study found a disproportionately large share of households at risk of eviction or foreclosure were made up of renters with low incomes and people of colour. Some activists argue that while moratoriums have helped desperate tenants in the short term by preventing evictions, in the long term they've merely deferred the problem to a later date.
The moratorium is something that is a band-aid because a lot of people are still in housing court and a lot of people still don't have money to pay the rent. So if you get rid of the moratorium, you end up in a shelter, you end up in the streets.
That's the fate many people are fearing for renters in Washington, D.C., where eviction protections are gradually being phased out. Local government officials say they've distributed around 70% of the $200 million allotted to D.C. for rental assistance from federal emergency funds. But across the country, there are concerns that this support is not getting to tenants fast enough. Early in September, officials meeting here at the White House said federal efforts were on track to deliver over half of the $16 billion in rental assistance likely needed through October. But they warned of a meaningful and painful gap of renters and families not covered if state and local governments didn't speed up disbursements. America's landlords have been frustrated by the obstacles to accessing federal aid as well. It was a group of property owners and developers who led the court challenge that ended the nationwide eviction moratorium, calling it unlawful.
This is Dean Hunter.
Dean Hunter is the chief executive of the Small Multifamily Owners Association. He says his organisation didn't initially oppose the federal moratorium, but he's seen how it's hurt small landlords who depend on regular payments from their tenants.
At one time, as like in March, we surveyed a few hundred landlords, and we found vacancies and delinquencies as high as 30 and 20%. 30% delinquencies and 20% vacancies. That's a 50% drop in your monthly revenue. No business that's not sustainable for any kind of business.
From the financial strain faced by so-called mum-and-pop landlords to the despair of low-income renters fearful of losing their homes, the pandemic has threatened the lives and livelihoods of ordinary Americans. But it has also thrown into sharp relief systemic issues that predated the pandemic, such as the country's shortage of affordable housing, leaving lawmakers suddenly scrambling to deal with a crisis years in the making. Jagruti Dave, CGTN, Washington.